Artistic vision is where you know
difference. If the fingers move in an isolated way from the hand and the forearm, then there'll be a certain... So we do have, there are two coordinations working here, single and double rotation. It's a little bit complicated to explain fully in our short time together, but that's how it functions. What I'm more interested in is explaining that how we go from this, which looks like, this doesn't look like piano playing at all. So the point is that that motion will unify everything, okay?
Makes sense.
And what begins to happen is that the so the point is that that motion will unify from, what I'm more interested in is explaining that how we go from this, which looks like, this doesn't look like piano playing at all. Okay? So the point is that that motion will unify everything, okay?
Makes sense.
And what begins to happen is that the forearm begins to train the fingers and assist them in their lifting. Because fingers have to move to play the piano. There's no such thing as playing the piano and not moving fingers.
Right.
But how those fingers move really make a very big difference. If the fingers move in an isolated way from the hand and the forearm, then there'll be a certain ceiling to everything. And people feel that they have to practice it and practice it every new piece and build it up and build it up and build it up. A facility should work like riding a bicycle. When you ride a bicycle, you know the coordination, and even if you don't ride in 5 years, you get back on the bicycle, and a few cranks, you're back on.
Yeah.
So when you have a coordination in your body, having fingers, quote unquote, is not something that you have to work on. There's a process of minimization. So what happens is that the size of things, the proportion of things, gets taught and trained into somebody. So what looks like a very big arm motion, like this, becomes much smaller. Smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's felt but it's not seen. See, I have a rotation. When I'm doing this, there's exactly what you saw like this. That's happening, but it's gone through several iterations. You're coached in how to minimize the rotation effectively.
That makes sense, because I remember working with someone who was, I was taking over for this other teacher who was trained in Taubman, and a little boy was playing his scales like this. And he said, oh, that's just the Taubman approach. But I thought, well, that's incredibly inefficient. But that makes sense what you're saying. Having a coach there to help you minimize those motions, to make them second nature, makes complete sense.
Think about this. What Taubman did was she discovered something. She didn't create something. She didn't decide from an extrinsic point of view that these certain things would probably make up a good piano technique or a good practice session. She found intrinsically what's occurring when somebody plays coordination-wise. What are the coordinations? And what she found was that the body lined itself up a particular way, like any good movement would do. Like if you have a seesaw and you have the fulcrum here, the plank moves very well. If the alignment of the fulcrum is off center, the movement of the plank is not very good.
Right.
So we have certain alignments in our body. Finger, hand, and arm have very specific alignments connected to an elbow body. Very good. Alignment of the fulcrum. Is off movement would do. Like if you have a seesaw and you have the fulcrum
Alignment. Alignment. Что ты тут несешь такое? Alignment. 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 Я нет, нет, и нет. Alignment. Думаешь? Ну-ка, сюда. Киргиз, опять киргиз. Пурпур. Вот здесь.
From here, the plank moves very well.
Синий.
If the alignment of the fulcrum is off center, the movement of the plank is not very good.
Right.
So we have certain alignments in our body. Finger, hand, and arm have very specific alignments, connected to an elbow, connected to a shoulder, connected to a torso. So we are, in fact, playing the piano with our whole body.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of alignment. So the torso has a certain place it needs to be. The finger, hand, and arm line up a certain way, and then we have movements. And we have a combination of movements that make up a piano technique.
Sure.
And basically, the forearm needs to adjust to the needs of the finger in 4 ways.
Okay.
So the first way we just talked about was the rotational movement. And you can even see it in an arpeggio, how the rotation would get you over the distance. If you have no rotation in an arpeggio, that's where you see this, where people try to get over like that, big motions like that. Or you see the finger reaching, or you see most likely the person just letting go. So you hear arpeggios that sound like this.
Right.
Right? So how do we get connected while we still maintain being comfortable and being able to play fast? We get connected through the rotational movement, but that's not the only thing that's going on here. When we play the piano, we have to take into consideration that we have long and short fingers. That's just a fact of life. And we have white and black keys.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's very interesting that it's not always understood what to do with all of that information. But I want to give you one very tangible thing. One of the main things that will stop fluency, that will stop a technique, which can cause injury, is what we call twisting, meaning when the hand and the fingers turn away from the forearm to the extreme range of motion in either direction. Okay?
Sure.
Now, the reason that that's important to understand is that there's a very common situation at the instrument that happens that produces twisting for everyone. Doesn't matter what kind of pianist you are. And it's very simple. when the thumb or the fifth finger plays on a black key, we have to prepare with in and out movements in order to avoid twisting. So what do I mean by that? If you take a look at the first prelude, that thing. So if I do nothing in terms of in and out, at the top, my fifth finger, which is a short finger, has to move like this to get into the B flat.
Right.
Okay? Now, that's not going to produce a very even, consistent sound because there's going to be a sudden sort of spastic motion to there. And then, insult to injury, the next one is the thumb on the black key. So you have a twist in both directions, which would disrupt fluency, physical fluency and musical fluency. Okay?
Absolutely.
So what Taubman discovered was we have the capability to move toward the fallboard and toward our body. And the way she came to this was she thought that she thought there was something involved with moving closer and moving toward her body. But her idea was that, well, probably it's lighter out here, so I'm probably always playing sort of out here. So what she did for many, many years was she put lipstick on her fingertips and she would play and she would see the different patterns, and she was very perplexed because she didn't see what she thought she would see. She thought she would see the lipstick all lined up in one line, and she saw the lipstick all over the place. So she was determined to make sense of this. And what she began to realize was that she was moving intuitively based on long and short fingers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take a look at this first one, after you've arrived on the thumb, the finger, hand, and arm as a unit can move you into that B flat and set you up for this C sharp.
Right.
So you know, do you want to try that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just going in. Yeah, and I had that issue. I remember in one lesson my teacher said, you look like you have Tourette syndrome because you're going, it was in Rachmaninoff's second concerto. All of a sudden you go, and then all of a sudden your hand just jerks in and then pulls back out. And he said preparing, like you're describing, is one of the things to make that more fluid. So
yeah,
very familiar with the concept.
We have lots of arrows in our music. If we do of this thing, right here, if I stay out here, I'm never going to make it there. So we have right here, I'm moving in.
Okay.
To show, so there any place where you have a thumb or a 5 on a black key, there has to be some degree of preparing that note in order not to twist.
Absolutely.
So she discovered that. So in a C major scale, what's very interesting is that most people will perceive that leverage is heavier the closer you get to the fallboard. I mean, that's just the physics of the instrument. The
Right.
closer we get to the fallboard, the heavier it is. Now, it's an interesting phenomenon. If you take your hand and you put it by your side, and you actually have an extremely good position of your hand, your hand position, so to speak, right? Because you don't have overly curled fingers. Now, the tradition in piano pedagogy has been hold an orange, hold a ball, so people have learned to curl their fingers. Now, the one thing that the curled fingers will do is it will get you outside of the black key area.
Right.
Because doing that will get, but take your fingers and curl them like this.
Okay.
Okay, and now try moving them.
Right. It's restricted.
Now, let them open and you see. So it's never going to go straight. Straight is just as bad as curling, but that's the alignment of the fingers. The fingers you move as one unit from the main knuckle, like this. But that does give us a dilemma, because when I'm on a middle C, it positions these fingers inside the black key area.
Uh-huh.
And that's where she realized that, well, it wasn't the role of the finger to pull out like this. It was the role of the whole unit to move out.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So what that means is I'm not curling my fingers. It takes care of two problems. I'm not curling my fingers, and I'm not getting stuck up here with a nice hand position, unable to play the piano because it's so heavy up here.
Sure. Interesting. And so obviously this is so much lighter. So it's I think I get what you're saying is, so if I start here, I would be pulling back on these and then working back up. Is that what you're getting at?
Oh, it's very specific. It's very specific. The second finger comes out. The third finger comes out and begins to reverse the arm back into the thumb because the thumb is short. See, the arm must always play into the thumb because it's a short finger. We can't play with an arm direction toward our body for the thumb because it makes us fall off the instrument and will tighten to keep on the instrument. Okay? So the thumb direction toward our we can't play with an arm direction toward our body for the thumb because it makes us fall off the instrument and will tighten to keep on the instrument. Okay? So the thumb now is forward. Now, that means that my fingers are still in their natural position. They're still located inside the black key area. So the last 5 fingers come out to the 2, out to the 3. Now, because I'm preparing for my shorter 5th finger, the 4 goes in and the 5 goes in.
Interesting. Okay.
And see, what's very interesting about that arm motion is people will often say, well, I have like 3 good fingers and 2 bad ones, you know? But it doesn't, because look, the amount of support from the forearm for the 4 and 5 is enormous.
Sure.
So you can try it if you want. You can see that if you play back like this, there's no support. But you can also see that my fingers are not curled. So I don't have the restriction of curling my fingers, which tightens the hand, tightens the wrist, tightens everything. So that's what she found. So that was like the second category of motion that she found. And then she realized that there were other things. So there are other things, meaning that I can do those 2 components perfectly and still have some problems. For instance, the crossing under of the thumb. I can do this, which I just rotated and I did the in and out perfectly. But I'm still very far from my thumb. So my thumb, which is right around the D, has to move all the way over to the F. And in speed, that's a very sudden motion and it's too big a distance. So what she realized was accompanying both those sets of motions was a third set of motions, meaning the walk D. So my thumb, which is right around the D, is perfectly and still have some problems. For instance, the crossing under of the thumb. I can do this, which I just rotated and I did the in and out perfectly. But I'm still very far from my thumb. So my thumb, which is right around the D, has to move all the way over to the F. And in speed, that's a very sudden motion and it's too big a distance. So what she realized was accompanying both those sets of motions was a third set of motions, meaning the walking hand and arm. So this lateral motion of the forearm we were capable of doing this. So we're capable of doing this motion, we're capable of doing this motion, and we're capable of doing this motion.
Okay.
So when that happens, I'll show you in the left. You can see how my thumb is exactly where I need it to be.
Right.
When I need it to be there. So if I don't do the walking hand and arm, this is where my thumb is. And that's why you see people do very awkward things like basically trying to get to their thumb.
Right. So are you saying, okay, so going down, you would come in to prepare for the short finger, and by that act of coming in and Are you saying that you can pull your thumb under? Because I know that's a big debate, you know, thumb under or no thumb under. Could you clarify that for us?
I certainly would. Okay, so first of all the principles have to check out. In other words, we can't have a set of something that works and then you abandon it to go to a different set. Okay?
Right.
So one of the things that I was saying previously is that we need to come out to the second finger.
Uh-huh.
The third finger being long, that comes out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because if here comes out, come out to the second finger.
Uh-huh.
The third finger being long, that comes out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because if here's another reason why it needs to come out. If I go into the third finger, then my thumb is naturally going to want to fall out. And if my thumb has the experience of falling out, I'm falling off the end. Here's another reason why it needs to come out. If I go into the third finger, then my thumb is naturally going to want to fall out. And if my thumb has the experience of falling out, I'm falling off the instrument. It makes people extremely insecure.
Okay.
Just fixing the concept that the thumb has to play forward from the arm can solve many, many passages for people. Just that one simple concept.
Okay.
So for people has to play forward from the arm can solve many, many passages for people. Just that one simple concept.
Okay.
So that's a given. I'm rotating and I'm coming out to the third finger and into the thumb. But the point is my thumb is still over here. So what?
Да нет, наоборот. Да нет, это что значит?
What's happening here? When I rotate, in addition to rotating, I'm allowing for a slight shift to the left. Now the whole mechanism is now aligned in a different left. In addition to rotating, I'm allowing for a slight shift to the left. Now the whole mechanism is now aligned in a different orientation to the instrument. I'm more at an angle. And I go a little bit further on the third finger, which puts my thumb exactly here. A very good indicator is to take those two notes and play it as an interval. That will tell you where the forearm really needs to get to.
How does that not, because you had talked about twisting, are you just talking about twisting towards
Take those two notes and play it as an interval. Go a little bit further on the third finger, more at an angle. And I go a little bit further on the third finger, which puts my thumb exactly here. A very good indicator is to take those two notes and play it as an interval. That will tell you where the forearm really needs to get to.
How does that not, because you had talked about twisting, are you just talking about twisting towards the pinkies or also the other direction? Because that would appear that it's twisting, but obviously.
I'm as straight as can be. In this
Oh,
moment.
okay. So you're talking the elbow as well. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the forearm, which is connected to the elbow, is moving laterally to the left. I'm moving down this thing. That puts me right here.
Got it.
Then the other thing to clarify the thumb is that the thumb, this is a very interesting thing. People are taught in an isolated technique to play the thumb, and when they play the two, to immediately put it under. This is a very common practice. Okay?
Right.
Now, here's what's very interesting. I come from the point of view that there's a kernel of truth to most things people do. Most things people tell people to do and have discovered, there's some truth to it.
Sure.
There is no such thing as totally wrong. So I just want to clarify it though, because the piano is actually, it's a very delicate act here. We
Right.
don't have enormous margin for error. So even if it's just a little bit not perfect, it could create a problem for someone. So,
Sure.
to clarify it means that somebody can check it in their technique, and very often they'll say, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And you know you don't have to work on that. But more often than that, they'll say, well, I was sort of doing that, but now that you clarify it, now I really feel it. So what's happening?
Кто здесь?
Here is that the thumb, if you turn it over this way, and it can move.
Нет, ну да, вот это чужое используешь, ты это я понимаю. Вы какие-то еще непонятные, что вы все пишете?
With absolutely no tension all the way to somewhere by the third finger.
Right.
Once you make it go to the fourth finger, you'll feel that there's some degree of tension occurring here. Tension is that the thumb, if you turn it over this way, and it can move with absolutely no tension all the way to somewhere by the third finger.
Right.
Once you make it go to the fourth finger, you'll feel that there's some degree of tension occurring here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I can take that rotational movement and allow the release of the thumb to let it fall behind the two. See, I have that movement behind the 2 and the 3 with no effort.
Sure.
So it can do that. So in combination with everything I've talked about so far, the rotation, the in and out, the walking hand and arm, my thumb is releasing behind the second finger and releasing behind the third. My arm brings me the rest of the way.
Okay, that makes sense. Very natural feeling. Yeah.
Okay, great. But that doesn't make for a very beautiful scale, because up to this point, all the motions that I've described to you actually have the piano sound quite notey and quite angular. But they are necessary, but it's not a finished product. So what Taubman realized was, and this is very common to most pianists have this functioning in their technique, or else they could never play, which is physical shaping. So physical shaping is really the height at which we land on any given finger. So what do I mean by that? We have the capability, like a staircase, to have our finger, hand, and arm land at different heights.
Uh-huh.
So when we put those heights next to each other, they start to form kind of curves, curvilinear motions. You can see it most obviously in a broken chord. If I do a broken chord with just rotation and in and out, it's going to sound like this, which is pretty awful. So how does that become music, but still maintain the fact that we need to play one finger, one hand, and one arm on every note? In other words, the minute we begin to reach over for things, everything is going to tighten.
Right.
So the minute we begin to stretch, and this was proven by doctors, you can do, some reading of doctors, they call it co-contraction. What co-contraction means is very simply this. If you open your hand wide like this,
okay,
you'll feel that the opposing set of muscles are actually pulling it back. That's actually to protect you so that you don't go further.
Okay.
But if you stretch, that's employing the abductor-adductor muscle sets. So now, the fact of the matter is the piano is underneath us. So we have to play stretch, that's employing the abductor-adductor muscle sets. So now, the fact of the matter is the piano is underneath us.
Wow.
Sets.
Okay.
But if you stretch, that's employing the abductor-adductor muscle set.
Движение. Надо работать самое. Вещи и вещи мышцы. Сейчас как это идут, я знаю.
So now, the fact of the matter is the piano is underneath us. So we have to play fingers down and up in order to play the piano. So when we stretch and we use the flexors and the extensors, we have what's called dual muscular pull. Pianists interpret that as tension.
Uh-huh.
So the minute something is in position, held in position, open like this, you're going to have inherent tension. Now, it goes against logic. This goes goes completely against logic, because logic tells us if I cover these notes, I have less of a chance of missing them than if I don't.
Oh yeah, I've thought that many times.
So it's hilarious because it, like I said, it's like going out in the cold. It's not necessarily that our instinct always brings us to the best place.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing is the more you try to cover the notes, the tenser this damn thing gets.
Uh-huh.
Now, what's operating horizontally is this mechanism of rotation, which has been internalized. How do I know it's internalized? Because I don't feel the negative impact of the lack of it. The negative is because I don't feel the internalized. How do I know it's internalized? Because I don't feel the negative impact of the lack of it. The negative impact of the lack of it is I feel stretched. I don't feel solid. I feel tight. I have some fatigue. That it's like the moisture. I only know it by the symptoms I have.
Sure.
You know, and quite honestly, when Taubman technique is really implemented correctly by somebody really experienced, it is invisible to the person doing it also. And this is what I want to reference. You know, there have been pianists who have moved beautifully at the instrument for ages, for hundreds of years, and more than we can count. Not only the lists, but many, many pianists, okay? If they felt that they were doing rotation, I think one of them would have been nice enough to say, I play really great because I do these things called single and double rotations, you know, but they don't because it just feels like an experience to them. They try to tell people what it is by describing the outcome. My arms felt light as feathers. My fingers felt like little butterflies going from note to note easily. The bell tones were ringing. It was a great experience. Actually, you know, these kinds of things are written in the great techniques of the masters. It's like a poetry book. And the thing that's so interesting is that very often you can't get here from there. You can't have information that you throw into somebody that will then have them play better. It's what I describe as an inside-out process. You're giving people the physical tools from the inside of their body that they can then internalize. It's not that different than riding a bicycle. When you first learn to ride a bicycle, somebody's holding the seat. And there are a lot of directions, like steer and pedal and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly, you get balance. And once you get balance, you're just in the experience of riding a bicycle. There's no more directions about how to ride. There's no more cluing it in. It's just an experience, you know? Sure. And in fact, if you ever ride a bicycle and you ask yourself the question, what are my feet doing? It's very weird to tune into something that's automatically happening in the body. So a good Taubman pianist, I have no idea that I'm not feeling individual rotations when I do this. I don't feel, I'm not thinking all of this is occurring. It's already in my body. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon. Rotation, I wish people would relate to rotation more as a way to stimulate what's natural in the body. It is a means whereby we can stimulate and produce a facility horizontally across the instrument. But it has to be done properly in order to work right. But in the end, no pianist of mine will go on stage and come off stage and say, I missed the double rotation in measure 54. They only know in normal terms, like I got mixed up at the recap, like just normal stuff.
Yeah.
The difference is they can go back into their practice room and actually focus in and think, why did that happen? What happened in that moment that I didn't feel well, or didn't analyze well, or didn't resolve that created that problem?
Sure.
But the problem is when things are very internalized, when you do something like this, you don't see much of anything.
Right.
You know, but I can tell you, I don't feel tight. I don't feel frozen over the notes. I don't feel weak. I feel like I can voice this pretty well and make this softer. But what I was going to tell you about this was the third set of motions, was that she discovered that shaping kind of unified it all. So how do we not have to think rotation and in and out and walking out and all that? Those get kind of internalized as natural responses to the needs of the music. And then the shaping is a very interesting thing. As I play, say, a B major scale, I'm going a little bit higher to the third finger and back down to level to the thumb.
Uh-huh.
Now, this is a movement done with my finger, hand, and arm unified. I'm not doing it as an isolated wrist motion. I can't separate the parts of my body and play well. You know, that's where you get things like this. People look like this. They lose total control. Or they do it from large muscle groups, like they do it from the upper arm. I was personally taught Russian school to do it very much from here.
Uh-huh.
Well, the problem with that is these are very slow moving muscles, very slow moving muscles. You try to move them in speed like that, try going around your house and doing this for all day. See what kind of condition you'll feel like at night.
Sure.
But the point of the matter is that she discovered that the finger, hand, and arm can move this very efficiently. So it's a question of the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog. Okay?
Sure. Uh-huh.
So when I take it and apply shaping to this passage, can you see that I have some undulating motion?
Yes.
We term it as an overshape going down here, and an across shape or undershape going up. I know that this is following what I'm doing. So there's movement here. I'm just not initiating it from there. That was one of the main things that happened to me, because from my teacher at IU, she shaped an awful lot. And I thought that felt good, so more of it would be better. As I exaggerated it, what happens with exaggerated shaping is that it pulls you off the bottom of the keys.
Right.
So it pulls you off the security of the bottom of the key. We don't need an enormous amount of it. But you can see the absence of it. If I do this, I'm going to do it with shaping. And it's very specific what the shaping is. In the scale, it's what we call a 5-note shape. High point is in the middle.
Makes sense.
And then this is a 4-note shape. So we have a 5-note shape and followed by a 4-note shape. It's very, very natural to the body to do it this way. So, but you can see it. I'm not going to learn it by making huge motions. It's just what I need.
That makes sense.
So, but you can hear that it takes it out of the realm of can you?
Cool.
I don't
Yeah,
know if
that makes complete sense.
Now, it's an interesting phenomenon shaping in the other direction, because it really helps a certain situation, which is crossing the thumb under. Even with everything that I showed you, it's very interesting. I still wouldn't be able to successfully play, because when I'm here, even here, I don't have a lot of space for my thumb. So in combination with everything else I was showing you, it gets a little bit higher to the 2, higher to the 3, back to level.
Uh-huh.
So this is, and every scale functions this way. The high point of the shape is always the finger before the thumb.
Makes a lot of sense.
See that gives space to this moment. This is no longer stuck like this, people isolated trying to get their thumb under.
That's great.
And you can see that it provides a certain amount of of musicality because it doesn't sound just mechanical.
Yeah.
Thumb under. No longer stuck like this, people isolated trying to get their thumb under.
That's great.
And you can see that it provides a certain amount of musicality because it doesn't sound just mechanical.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So that's a lot that I've said. What are you thinking?
Oh no, I think this is exactly what I'd wanted. I wanted an overview of the Taubman technique, and you explained those. It sounds like 4 pillars of the technique very beautifully. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Anytime.
I truly appreciate your time, and thanks for spending it. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to post part or all of this on my YouTube channel, because I know people would absolutely love to hear these ideas, because I feel like so many pianists don't know what's wrong, and having some of these explanations could really help them. So
yes. One thing that I would like to say is that to avoid misunderstanding, not everybody who comes to a Taubman teacher in a way gets taken down to, you know, the smallest level of movement. When there are pianists, like I said, every pianist is doing a certain percentage correctly. It is possible to work with somebody who can play very well and just actually put in the correct adjustments in the right places, that they will get a tremendous relief and improvement, because the mechanism is basically a healthy mechanism. So it doesn't always mean that it's not a cookie cutter method. It's really about evaluating what the pianist needs according to their concerns. They're the ones very often who direct us. They say, you know, right here I have a problem, right here I have a problem. And we look at it, and what we have learned, I mean, of course, I've been involved for almost 40 years, so I have a certain sensitivity and an eye for it, so I can go very directly to a problem, probably faster than most. So it's that kind of like split-second kind of split second judgment of what's happening that makes the teaching successful. So I think a lot of people shy away because of a few things. They think they're all going to be rotating for 5 years before they play a piece. They can't play any of their old pieces ever again, all of that stuff. And that's not necessarily true. There's information here that people fall along a certain spectrum. And an experienced teacher knows exactly where to begin and start so that the overall situation gets facilitated. So it's good that people understand that there's a breadth of knowledge here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody goes through all the same steps.
Sure.
One lesson can look very differently from another.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I really want to thank you, and I really want to tell you, I think you're a total inspiration. Honestly, I think you're a total inspiration. I think that raising the whole idea of working on music and trying to help people is a total inspiration, because I don't know that there's a lot of resource out there.
Oh,
so
well, thank you.
Yeah, I think you're doing a tremendous service to the piano world. I think that it's so very refreshing to sometimes hear you express that, you know, your challenges along the way. I think that's just extremely generous of you, and I can really get a sense that you're so devoted to your students, which I think in this world is something very special.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I mean, it's very obvious you're the you're very devoted to spending 90 minutes with me here. I'm so grateful, and I hope that the information can also help everybody else. So thank you not only for sharing it with me, but with everyone on my channel too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Again, a huge thank you to Dr. Dorso for spending so much time eloquently explaining this method to each of us and giving us some tools that we can start practicing right away. If any of you have questions for him, again, his website is robertdorso.net. If any of you have any questions for me, my email is josh@joshwrightpiano.com. I have linked a few different resources in the description below, including a new webinar I put out with 10 of my favorite tips to take your playing to the next level, if you'd like to check that out. I hope you all have a great week of practicing. See you next time.
Нет. Они же не музыканты все, я понимаю. Ну, я понимаю. Тем обиднее тебе становится, нет? Что?
Playing a concert of my own compositions. So for about 3 days in a row, I practiced basically as many hours a day as possible. That was the first time I began to notice pains. The pain, after it developed in both arms, got so bad that it interfered with virtually every aspect of life. Brushing my teeth became an ordeal. Brushing my hair was awful. It's very lucky that I did run into trouble and get pain, because if I had not got pain, I almost undoubtedly would not have been led to Mrs. Taubman.
Strong forte. Wait. There's a lack of awareness of discomfort. It is assumed that it has to be uncomfortable. And still today in the main conservatories, you hear students say, "Oh, I practice a lot today, my hands really ache," without realizing that pain is a sign that they're playing badly, that they're hurting themselves. This is what kept me teaching all these years, because as time went on, I saw more and more wonderful young prodigies being cut down much too early.
Well, the first thing that went were the shoulders and the muscles in here. Until they went to the point where I had muscle spasms all across the shoulders and upper back and even my neck.
The time you wait, I don't know if this makes any sense to you, but it should feel not like if you're concentrating on something that you need to do, but as if you're about to invent something. That if you're really about to do like a cadenza and a concerto, because if you listen to even Milstein playing this when he's older, it's not even what's written. I mean, he changes stuff, he makes stuff up, he does things differently, and that just shows that, you know, he published this, but what this really is Paganini just going on, doing something different with all his themes, and if you want to do this differently, then that's really fine. So he himself did that. So there's some things he does that aren't written, and some people pick up and some people change. So Now, as I say, I think we want to get a bit of
это нет, это не ошибка, вот это нет, это не ты. Нормально, вот это. Думаешь? Меня там прям все. Ты серьезно? Вот это есть. Заплатить за коммунальность, за универсальник. Ну нет, ну давай. Читать даже не надо думать, да, что ты говоришь.
Playing a concert of my own compositions. So for about 3 days in a row, I practiced basically as many hours a day as possible. That was the first time I began to notice pains. The pain after developing teeth, I almost undoubtedly would not.
Shoulders and the muscles in here. Until they went to the point where I had muscle spasms all across the shoulders and upper back and even my neck.
And at some point, I started to hurt from the tip of my fifth finger in the right hand all the way up to my shoulder.
You know, I had been for x-rays, and I had been to doctors who gave me Valium, and I had people who told me I had scoliosis, and this, that, and the other thing.
Not only could I not play, I could lift nothing, not even a paperback book, nothing.
I used to do things like play the Ocean Etude of Chopin 3 times in a row. And when I was finished, the muscles on my arms would be like, you know, just throbbing, you know. I did that to gain endurance, so that I could play at once, you know.
Part of the training of pianists, for example, is endurance. The word is repulsive, it's abhorrent. The feeling of playing at the keyboard should be euphoric. You should not be aware of your tools. How can you interpret if you're enduring something at the same time? Your playing can only be as beautiful as the tools allow them to be. It's spasming, right? Suppose you had to do just 5 fingers. Would it pull up? Let me see. Not too bad there, is it? No. Now suppose you do a scale. Does it pull up? Yes, it does. When does your 5th finger pull up when you play which finger on the scale? Would you find that for me? Do it fast and see what happens. What long before you got there? On your 3rd finger, right? Right. And that's because you're anticipating getting your thumb under. And in doing that, there's a pull. Now, what we're going to do, whenever I take on new students, there are new problems. The variables are so enormous in the variety of coordinations that no 2 problems are identical. You see, and yet basic principles are identical. So that we have something, a guidepost from which to work. We find a great problem of pianists is the amount of twisting that goes on in the hand in this way, like Charlie Chaplin's feet. You see, it was much improved already. Much improved. Now, where were you just now? Now, let's take that again. Now, here. Yeah. Why take the 4th finger so you can make sure you twist? The 4th finger on a black key to go to a thumb, if you have an octave distance, is atrocious. The small amount of twisting that 4th finger creates, I would guess that half the pianists who are injured and crippled do so because they're using the 4th finger on the black key. I find that's one of the most common causes of injury. So take your 5 there, okay? There.
Не, я что, разбираться буду, что с меня нужно? Вот мне ладно, буду разбираться. Ну, я знаю. ничего не возьмешь, понимаешь, что самостоятельно. Нет, я утверждать не буду. Ну, что-то можно взять, что-то можно взять. Не знаю, что мне взять. Ну, так я говорю. Опа. Тут здесь. Кто там? Кто там? Что тогда? Задачку решаем, да, задание?